So the great Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius actually had a few words to say about RM, and I'm going to just quickly read this passage to you, if I can find it. So it starts here. There's no page number, but at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work so that I can afford an RM. In this video, you're going to see a watch enthusiast trying to justify something absolutely ridiculous. So let's begin. So let's begin with the specs and in-hand feel of the watch, starting with the case size. The case size is 38 millimeters across and a height of 45 millimeters and a thickness of 11.5 millimeters. So it's a really nice size for the average wrist and even larger wrists because it's got that height. As you can see, the sapphire crystal is curved both on the top and bottom, so it is a see-through case back, and it's got this wonderful AR coating. Because of the curvature, you can see that blue hue quite often, and that's really nice. Now, what's special about this piece is it's made out of titanium, like all RM watches if they're not made out of precious metals. But the movement, the bridges and the base plate are also titanium, which was quite new back in the day in 2004 when it was launched. Now, the movement itself has 32 joules, a beat rate of 28,800 vibrations per hour, and a power reserve of 55 hours. You can see the rotor, which is in a different color to the rest of the movement because it's a different material. It's made out of tungsten. Now, typically you find gold or some sort of precious metal because of the weight in these expensive watches, but this one's made out of a tungsten cobalt alloy. Something really special about the rotor is the fact that it has variable geometry. Now, I'll get on to what exactly this is and why it's so special later in the video. And if it matters, this watch has a rated depth of 100 meters and it's limited to 300 pieces. On the wrist, it really feels like nothing. Unless you tighten it enough, you really can't feel or notice the watch, which is a bit scary when it comes to something so valuable. But it's also quite a remarkable feat and achievement by the brand. Now, typically I don't like light watches, but I can excuse this one because of the sheer technology that's gone into the movement and the case. I do really like the strap. It's extremely comfortable. I can't tell if it's some sort of synthetic leather or it's just some sort of leathery silicone, but it feels really comfortable on the wrist, and that's what matters. Moreover, I think the case size is fantastic, whether you've got a small, medium, or even heading towards a large sized wrist. Because of that tonal shape, it kind of just works, I guess. And on my wrist, which is a little bit over 7 inches, 7.4 inches, it fits really well. I think it's a perfect size. Furthermore, I do have to say, out of all the watches I've experienced, this is definitely so far the most special one. Now, I got hands-on with this piece thanks to the one and only kenwatches.com. They're a store in Hong Kong. They've got exclusive watches like this RM. They've got all sorts of AP, Patek, Rolex, whatnot, Omega. All the watches. Check them out at kenwatches.com. They do ship worldwide. So let's get on to why it's worth the hype. Let me begin with why it's not worth the hype, so those of you that are doubting my sanity have some peace of mind. So RM produces artificial scarcity to the very extreme. Every good brand does this to some level, even though if they don't admit it, like Rolex. But every good brand, every popular brand, every desirable brand has to use artificial scarcity to create demand that exceeds their supply. That's basically good business. But the thing is, with RM, their artificial scarcity tactics are so extreme. It's quite obvious that they do love the gray market and they do love seeing their pieces being listed at 10 times their retail, which is already quite obnoxiously high. I went to an RM boutique in Hong Kong and they literally had nothing there. When you're producing watches that retail above 100k US and you still have nothing in the boutique to show those customers that are willing to spend over 100k US at your store, that's insane. And that's one of the reasons to not like RM and their tactics. Now, from a materials and design perspective, RM is at the top of the game. They use fantastic materials. They like to experiment a lot and they spend a lot of time and money just making things work. So their pieces are very unique. It's in-house to the next level because they produce their own screws. So it's not just the materials for the watch that they need to produce, but they need to figure out how to manufacture these materials as well. And they have to figure out the tools to manufacture said materials. So it's more in-house than it probably ever gets. And that's one of the things I love about the brand. But still, in terms of the monetary value and the materials used, there's a vast difference there. And that's one of the reasons to not like them, because they still are very expensive, regardless of the amount of R&D or the material technology that they use. The other thing is the tangible factors of the watch. It's very much kind of like a toy because of the lightness and, well, the materials that they do use to make it extremely light. It feels almost toy-like. It doesn't feel like something substantial, but it's not supposed to. But still, when you're spending so much for so little, that disconnect is quite disconcerting and makes it really not worth the hype and price. Now I'm going to talk about why it's worth the hype to me. The whole idea of this video, why I think RM is actually worth the hype. This is a very personal perspective, so don't expect all that much rationality, because at the end of the day, when it comes to watches, we're all a bit ridiculous. None of this is rational. So keep that in mind. So here's the first reason. There's one thing that I like more than watches, and that's cars. I love the automotive industry. I like it more than watches. And I have a channel talking about watches. So when I say I like cars more, I really like cars. So when a watch manufacturer goes and incorporates automotive design into their watch, they've got me. That's all you need to do, and I'm there. So the entire brand identity of RM is quite very sports and automotive inspired design. So this particular watch, the RM5 Felipe Massa, well, it's fully connected to F1. Surprisingly, I don't care so much about the Felipe Massa connection, because I'm more interested in the car, in the automotive design. I don't care about the drivers so much. So the F1 connection to me is not all that important, but the design of the piece is very important. Typically, I don't like lightweight watches. And even here in RM, I do have that slight hesitation when it comes to the feel of the watch. But I can understand it. I see the relevance of lightweight design. I see the relevance of using titanium, not just in the case, which a lot of manufacturers do, but also in the movements. For this watch, the base plate and the bridges are made out of titanium. So this is sandblasted titanium with a PVD coating, which at the time in 2004 was extremely difficult and quite revolutionary to achieve, putting titanium in a movement back then. And RM did that. And I like that. That's fantastic. But what's more interesting to me is the rotor geometry. Specifically, it's the variable rotor geometry. So the idea of this is you can change the moment of inertia of the rotor. So basically, depending on how you use the watch and how much you shake your hand, you can decide whether you want the rotor to spin more or spin less. So if you have heavy usage of the watch physically, then you of course want it to spin less. And this can be adjusted. This can be adjusted by changing the physical geometry of the actual rotor. That's pretty cool. No one's ever going to do this, because no one's going to take apart this watch just for one event where they use the watch more than regular day to day. But still, the fact that you can do this is so exceedingly cool to me. And that's one of the things I love about this watch. You can tell I'm getting excited because it is very exciting to me. Now, the connection I make between the variable rotor geometry and the automotive industry is, it's kind of like setting up a suspension for a race car. When you're on track, you have different criteria for the suspension. You need a lot more stiffness, you need a lot more rigidity, and it needs to be able to handle a lot higher lateral forces, especially around the curves. Whereas when you're on the road, you want a much more comfortable ride, and you want it to be able to take care of potholes, and you can set it up to be a lot softer. And that's very cool to me. That's kind of what I think about when I see this variable rotor geometry. It's not so much as deciding to play tennis one day or just taking a stroll in the park. So this connection, again, is super exciting to me, and it's one of the reasons why I'm quite ecstatic about RM as a brand and the watch. Now, even the screws in these RM watches, they kind of remind me of center locking wheels on a race car. So regular cars have 5-6 lug nuts in order to take the wheel off. But when you're on a racetrack, you want to be able to quickly swap out wheels like an F1. So you need the center locking wheel, so it's just one central bolt to take the wheel off. And these screws, they're designed remind me of that, which is another cool connection for me personally with the watch and the automotive industry. Now, is it really worth the hype? Well, it differs from person to person. These watches do hold their value. They do appreciate. I don't know how long that's going to go on, because the amount of appreciation RM has seen is frankly like no other brand. But still, technically, it's worth it as an investment point of view at the moment. But is it worth the price for the physical artifact? I don't know. That differs from person to person. To me, it's the most exciting thing that I've seen in watches so far. It's one of the most exciting watches I've had hands-on with, and that's the pure enjoyment aspect of it makes it all worth it. Now, I want to hear what you think of this. Do you like the automotive connection? Basically, do you like cars? Do you not? Do you not care about this? You might think it's absolutely nonsense because it's so lightweight and so expensive. But let me know in the comments below. I want to know exactly how you feel about this watch and what you think of my personal connection and opinions as well. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video. Cheers.